Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Creating a Significant Email Newsletter. My name is Jill, and presenting today is Colleen, and we are both members of the Lifecycle Marketing team here at Vertical Response. Just a couple things before I hand it over to Colleen. First of all, this webinar is probably going to be about 45 to 50 minutes long. Probably 45, right?
Yeah, sure.
We're going to say 45. There will be time for Q&A at the end. So if you do think of questions along the way, go ahead and type those into the box that you see in your GoToWebinar window, and we'll be happy to answer any of those questions that you have at the end of the webinar. One of the questions we get at pretty much every webinar we do is this being recorded? And the answer is yes, we are recording this. And this will go up on our resources page on our website next week. So look for that there. So with that, I think that's all of the housekeeping stuff. I'm going to hand it over to Colleen.
Perfect. Thank you, Jill. All right, so what is on the agenda? Number one, most important, what is the purpose? What is the point of creating an email newsletter? Second, of course, the content. This is the heart and soul of your newsletter, so that is important to go over. And then style and tone. This also is important because it is quite different from the other communications that you're going to be doing by email. And then, of course, presentation and design. These are best practices. Promotion and list building, because your newsletter rocks, so you want to get it out there. And then, of course, reporting what's important to look at, and then testing your newsletter. All right, so why exactly am I talking to you about email newsletters? So I am the managing editor for the VR Buzz newsletter that you see here on the screen. That is, if you aren't a subscriber, if you aren't familiar with it, it is the Vertical Response weekly newsletter. And then I also manage the VR Marketing blog. So the VR Buzz, again, like I said, is a weekly newsletter. It contains email, social media, event marketing tips, tactics, etc. This is sent to hundreds of thousands of people each week. And we send it to 9 varying different audiences. So we actually send it to people, whether they are a customer or if they're using the Salesforce integration, if they are a lead, etc. So we have slightly different versions that we send to 9 different varying audiences. So that kind of gives you an idea of what I'm doing with the VR Buzz.
So in a nutshell, you send out a lot of newsletters.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And then previously also I've done email marketing for a large corporate retail company, and I was also a managing editor of a newsletter in Australia. So it's kind of on the other end of things. I was a customer using a company very similar to Vertical Response when I was in Australia. So, and essentially I am Vertical Response's biggest customer because I'm using our product, I'm creating the newsletters, I'm sending them out to my own customers, etc. All right, so let's get to the point of a newsletter. So the purpose of an email newsletter is, first and foremost, to build a relationship. In the world of email marketing, your newsletter is your customer's BFF. So you're not going to be a pushy, I mean, you never want to be a pushy salesman, but in this aspect, you definitely aren't going to be a pushy salesman. You're more of a friend. So the purpose, of course, is to create, build, form that relationship with your audience. And then, of course, you're going to educate them, inform them, entertain them. You are their beloved friend. So the purpose isn't, again, to make a sale. It's actually to get a click. So, and that goes along the lines, too, with how much information do you put in the newsletter. You always want them to click, for more information, etc. But with any luck, that click will eventually lead to a sale. So your email newsletter is your pal and confidant. Then I have a quote here from Nielsen Norman Group. Who is Nielsen Norman? They are a consulting and research firm. They specialize in user experience and usability for social media, email newsletters, internet, mobile, etc. They have these really extensive research projects that they do. They're about 600-page reports. So they're really large, but they're really interesting, extremely helpful and useful, but they are kind of costly. So, so I have a quote here. It says 69% of users said that they look forward to receiving at least one newsletter, and most users said that a newsletter has become part of their routine. This also comes in handy, and it's important to note for frequency and consistency. And it says very few other promotional efforts can claim this degree of customer buy-in. Way to go, newsletters. All right, so you can see here we have the Golden Girls. That is your email newsletter. Not the guy over here, not the pushy salesman. So again, I have a quote here. And this was really, really interesting from their latest research that they just sent out. It says that their most significant finding is that email newsletters, that users actually have emotional reactions to them. So newsletters feel personal because they arrive in an inbox, and people have these ongoing relationships with them because they're always there. And then the positive aspect of this emotional relationship is that newsletters can create a bond. All right, so we have LL Cool J here. If any of you know his 1991 song Mama Said Knock You Out, the very first line he says is, "Don't call it a comeback." So LL Cool J is here to tell you, don't call it a newsletter if it doesn't contain substantial news. It isn't valuable, informative, or educational. It's sale-centric because, again, your newsletter is not about sales. And it isn't frequent and or consistent. So if your email looks like a newsletter but it isn't valuable or educational, then you shouldn't call it a newsletter. And Chris Brogan, the social media guru, he has a good thing that he says that 85% of email newsletters should contain content that doesn't intend to sell anything. So it is possible for you to put a sale in there, but it definitely shouldn't revolve around that. So what makes a newsletter valuable? This again is from the Nielsen Norman Group research, their most recent research. It says that 40% of users said that the following aspects make for valuable newsletters. So 1, it informs of work-related news or company actions. That was mentioned by 2/3 of users. It informs about personal interests and hobbies, informs about events, deadlines, important dates. And here you do see reports, prices, or sales, but that's not the main point of your newsletter. So bottom line, it's informative, educational, and helpful. All right, content. So this is the meat of your newsletter. There's a lot of information that you can include in your newsletter. It just depends on your audience, etc. But this is just a handful of different ideas that you can include in your newsletter. So number 1, blog post. If you do have a blog, that's great. If you don't have one, maybe you should start one. It's actually really great content to put in your newsletter. So it's not only an excellent way to promote content within your blog, but then you can also repurpose it. If you think about it, not everyone subscribes to your blog through RSS. Not everyone bookmarks your blog. You would like to hope and think that they would, but not everyone does. And sometimes they don't always remember to go back to it. So this really allows you to put your blog content in the forefront. And our Google Analytics even show that the highest peak in blog readership is when we include that content in our newsletter. So then, of course, tips, tactics, how-tos, tutorials. You are the experts. Customers are coming to you for this information, so give them as much knowledge, free knowledge, as possible. They will love you for it. And then, of course, industry news. Third-party news. So don't be afraid to share news, information, blog posts, stats, etc. from other resources, companies, or bloggers. Obviously, you want to give them credit. But here at Vertical Response, we share content from other resources on a regular basis, and it's very popular. So if it's relevant to your audience, then definitely share it. Plus, including other companies or bloggers, etc., can create more exposure from their audiences onto your newsletter. Then, of course, events, dates to remember, holidays, interesting facts. We have reviews. This could be anything, a product review, a book review, app, music, restaurants, anything like that. This is why sites like Yelp are so popular. People love to hear about other people's opinions. And then you can include sales, like I've mentioned, and then photos. We are in such a big photo-centric social media time right now, especially with sites like Pinterest and Instagram, Tumblr. Photos are really, really important, and that, too, will just make your newsletter more visually appealing. Contests and contest winners. This is an excellent way to promote a contest if you have one. And then it also allows you to display that who the winners are and why they've won, etc. And that That is always interesting to people. Resources, this could be guides, webinars, etc., any type of resource that you have. Company news. So what is your company doing? Are you moving? Do you have improvements to the service or product that you have available? Do you have new products? Have you won any awards? Are you doing any volunteer projects or philanthropies, etc.? And then infographics. Infographics are kind of exploding all over the place, and they're awesome. So they're really fun because it's great statistical information, but with fun graphics, and it's all really very visually pleasing. So, and those have been doing really well in our newsletter as well. And you can find them anywhere. You can also find companies who will put them together for you if you want to start creating your own infographics. So I highly recommend those because they're great. And then webinars or videos. If you have done a webinar yourself or you've done videos, even a short video tutorial, anything like that, you can put that in your newsletter. Testimonials, again, same thing. People like to hear what other people have to say. So putting your customers' testimonials about certain products or your service, etc., that's great. And my favorite, recipes.
A couple things that I thought I would interject here.
Sure.
First of all, I like how extensive this list is. And one of the things that I hear a lot in webinars and when I'm talking to people is I think a lot of people think that newsletters are for nonprofits. Or maybe a B2C, maybe. But I think a lot of the stuff that you've come up here is also really useful for B2B as well, especially things like company news, resources, tips and tactics, industry news. Those are the sort of things that you can share even in a B2B newsletter, which might make it more interesting to your recipient because not all B2Bs are sending out things like a newsletter like that. So it isn't just for nonprofits. I think anybody could benefit from having a newsletter. And also, I like that you have recipes in there. This is something that I've seen quite a bit in newsletters that you wouldn't necessarily expect the recipe, but like chiropractors, I've seen them use recipes because they're kind of about health, and so including something healthy like a healthy recipe goes with the type of people who are going to be wanting to read a newsletter like that. Also, insurance companies, I've seen them include recipes in their emails as well, and again, you know, as an insurer, you want people to stay healthy. So, you know, and it's not something I think people would immediately associate with either of those two categories or industries, but it also works really well and gives something slightly different to the people who are reading the newsletter.
Yeah, it's creative and fun.
Yes.
All right, so I'm just going to go through different examples of content that I've seen in some really great newsletters so you can kind of get an idea of these put into practice. So this here, again, my favorite recipes. This newsletter is by Veg News. They are actually a Vertical Response customer, and they have a couple of different newsletters, but this one specifically is the Recipe Club. So you can actually see in the top paragraph where it says tequila white bean chili. This is actually talking about, there's a blog post that talks about gluten-free vegan bites for game night. So that could be for tailgating or Super Bowl, etc. And then they actually have an entire recipe here for that bean chili. All right. So International Volunteer HQ. This is a volunteer organization. I actually volunteered with this organization when I went to India. And they have a monthly newsletter here. So you can see there's a little intro paragraph. And then this section here with this photo is actually displaying, they had a photo and video competition for their volunteers. So their volunteers could submit videos and photos from their volunteer experiences, and they could win $100 US. So they have the winners here from March, and they have their winning entries, etc. So that's really fun to actually find out who they are, and you get to view their photos and videos, etc. This is one of my favorite newsletters. I've dissected it, so and I've split it up into different sections. So, but this first half here, you can see at the very top where it says spot, click, read, go. They have an image there, and that actually is not a video. It's just an image of the video. So when you click on it, it goes straight to the video, which is a great way to implement webinars or trailers, etc., into your newsletter. So they have a whole description here, and then a link to a trailer to this new film. And then below you can see they have screening and event highlights. Again, another trailer and some information. And then over on the right-hand side, they have upcoming classes and workshops. So they actually have workshops and classes at the Film Society that you can take, and they have descriptions there. And then at the very top, this is usually at the very bottom of their newsletter, but I cut it up and put it up here, is the cinema calendar, which is awesome because they put every single film that they have for that month and the day and the time that it's running. So you can actually reference back to this newsletter on a regular basis to check out which films they have running.
I can say that Les Blank makes great movies, and Garlic is as good as 10 Mothers will make you hungry, so you should go see that one.
Great. All right, this is just a little snippet that I took from the Roxy. So the Roxy is the famous music venue in LA. But this part of their newsletter I thought was really interesting. So they actually had someone come to the Roxy, and they took a fan took a photo from one of the shows there and had posted it on Instagram. So the Roxy found this photo on Instagram from one of the fans who had been there, really liked it. So they put the fan's Twitter handle in there and their picture that they took from Instagram. So that's a really excellent way to not only, they're referencing back to a show that they had, but they're also including the fans who come to their music venue. So that's a really fun way to incorporate content. This is the Betty Crocker weekly newsletter. So you can see on the left-hand side they have today's dish, so the hottest food trends. They have a recipe there for beer-battered broccoli.
That
sounds
delicious.
Amazing. Yes. Then at the very bottom, you can see it says Vote Best for Best of Summer 2012. So they have a competition going on. So they have a contest or competition. You can go ahead and vote there. And then on the right-hand side, this is what I really wanted to note. They have insider raves and faves. So these are people and their favorite recipes. So you can see quotes here from people regarding their favorite recipes. So it's not just about Betty Crocker, it's about the people who are making these recipes.
Mm-hmm. Testimonials are very powerful, or can be very powerful. So, as Colleen said earlier, Yelp is very popular. People like to see what other people have to say about stuff.
Yep.
And this is a great way to get people talking about whatever it is that you're offering. Even if you're offering a service, like you're a mechanic or something, getting a couple of nice quotes from your customers can go a long way in your emails.
Yep, and you can even, in the newsletter previously, you can ask for people to submit. So you could do a whole content block on, ask for, we'd like to hear what you have to say. Submit your testimonial. All right, this is from 826 National. Again, I cut this newsletter up, so this isn't how it actually looks. So 826 National, this also is a vertical response nonprofit customer. They have 8 different writing and tutoring centers across the United States. They have one in San Francisco, LA, New York, Chicago, etc. And it's really great. They are writing and tutoring centers, so they're dedicated to supporting students who I think are 6 to 18. And they're helping them improve their writing skills and then also helping teachers to inspire their own students to write. It's a really great organization. And you can see here they obviously like writing, so they have a lot of text here. But what's great to know at the very top, so they have in honor of Black History Month. So they're incorporating a holiday into the newsletter, and they've actually included a poem that one of their 826 students has written that was featured in an anthology. And then they've actually included the iPad app as well to read that. So that's really fun. And then right below that where you see this journal here, this is a collaboration that they have with another company creating this journal, and they have all of these events that are associated with it. And then this is actually my favorite on the right-hand side is a staff highlight. So including information about the people who actually work for you. So this is a whole highlight about a girl who is on the staff and all of the information about her. So that's another really great thing to include in into your newsletter. All right, Sublime Stitching. So this is one of my favorites as well. So Jenny Hart, you can actually see she has the braids down below. She is an embroidery artist and DIY creator of Sublime Stitching, which is a funky embroidery company, an online store, and it's kind of exploded into this big thing. She now has 8 embroidery tutorial books, which are great. I personally have one, and I now know how to embroider. But
I personally have bought things from her.
Yes. And yes, I buy a lot of stuff on her site. It's
Yeah,
great, and I love her newsletter too. So in this newsletter, again, I've sliced and diced this, but you can see at the very top she has video tutorials. So she's actually done tutorials teaching you how to do different stitches, etc. So she has included her video tutorials. And then on the right-hand side at the top, this is a art project that she is a part of. So it's actually another group of people who are doing something. She's a little part of it, but it's talking about this whole project. And then down below, the Renegade Craft Fair is another big fair with lots of DIY crafters that she was a part of, and this is an interview with her. So you could do interviews, little projects that you might be a part of, video tutorials, lots of information that you can include. All right, so these 3 aspects are super important to any email, but especially your newsletter, because you're being informative, and then really you're trying to get a click and an open. So if you don't get anyone to open your newsletter, all that hard work you've done has kind of gone up in smoke. So these are 3 really important aspects that we want to look at. So the from label, we highly recommend that your from label should be your company name, not your personal name. The only instance in which this might be different is, let's say you're a real estate agent, and people are more familiar with you as a person, your actual personal name, and not the agency that you work for.
Right, or like a doctor or something
right,
like
exactly. That. Otherwise, we highly recommend that it's your company name. You want people to know immediately right off the bat when they're looking in their inbox who that newsletter is actually from. Subject line, it needs to be enticing, period.
Not exclamation point?
Well, yeah, maybe that too. But, this really needs to grab your reader's attention, but it also needs to inform them of what's actually in that newsletter. So I have some don'ts here. Repeating the month or the week or even using the word newsletter is really unnecessary in your subject line. It really just takes away from what you could be informing them of. So don't do something like June newsletter or your monthly newsletter or this week's newsletter or even the VR Buzz. You don't need to put the name of your newsletter in the subject line, because once they open it, they'll see the company name, they'll see your logo if you have one, or a name specifically for your newsletter. So really just give them the information right off the bat in the subject line about what's going to be in there and make it enticing too. So I have another quote from here too. It says, from Nielsen Norman, it says, some users who forwarded email newsletters on to others, say their friends, sometimes changed the subject line to make it more interesting. So that's kind of sad. The word newsletter isn't instructive or informative. It pushes valuable information out of the content, about the content out of view from an email inbox. And then, of course, we have the pre-header, which is basically your secondary subject line. You don't want to repeat your from label or your subject line here. It's pretty much a second subject line that'll really get your customers wanting to open your email. All right. So many apologies to Verizon Wireless and DNA Lounge, but these are some what not to do's regarding your from label and subject line. So you can see the first one, and these are actually from my inbox, my own personal inbox. So the from label from Verizon Wireless is great. I know exactly who that is right off the bat, but the subject line could really use some major rework and some pizzazz. So again, they're using the month, so your May newsletter, they're using the word newsletter. And again, they're repeating their from label. So your May newsletter from Verizon Wireless. I already know that it's going to be a newsletter. I already know what month it is, and I already know, again, that who was from. So this doesn't actually entice me or give me any reason to open the newsletter. And you can see here all of them bold. From Gmail, which means I've never opened any of them.
The interesting thing is that their pre-header looks like it has more information than their subject line.
Right, exactly. So right off the bat, all I know is that it's from Verizon Wireless, but there's nothing really enticing in there. On the bottom here, you can see, so DNA Lounge is a club comedy music venue here in San Francisco. But their from label is from Jamie Zawinski, and I have no idea who Jamie Zawinski is. I know what DNA Lounge is, but I don't know who Jamie is. So this is a case where you would not want to use your personal name. You would want to use DNA Lounge. Yeah, which you can see they've actually used in their subject line. And then again, they've just said upcoming DNA Lounge events. If they actually listed off the events and I could see something that sounded really fun that I wanted to attend, I would be more likely to open it. So they really need to switch the subject line, put DNA Lounge with the from label, and then just tell me right off the bat what events are going on. So again, you can see I didn't open any of those. So, yeah. So again, this is my inbox. Which newsletters did I read? I put little stars next to them. So 7x7 Magazine, I know exactly who that is. Their subject line, Best of SF Foods, Stargazing in Tahoe, Guide to Pride Mayhem, that was last week. So obviously they're telling me everything that this newsletter is about. It looked super interesting, and I opened it. Next one, TicketWeb Weekly Mix, I know who that's from. Your weekly mix from TicketWeb. It's all repeated. And again, you can see their pre-header, TicketWeb Weekly Mix. And then I get a hey. So that's not really enticing at all. It's not telling me what's going on in there. Didn't open it. In this here, you can see Sublime Stitching. Jenny actually put her first name and then her company. A lot of people know Jenny Hart as Jenny Hart. So she put Jenny and then Sublime Stitching. She has a new t-shirt video and some stork scissors. That sounds really interesting. Click. Again, 7x7, they're really great at putting everything that their whole newsletter is about. So if that sounds interesting to me, I'm going to open it. And then lastly, we have VertiCorrespond.
I'm so glad you opened ours.
So I actually opened the newsletter that I sent out, which is great because it was really interesting. So again, here, Small Biz Social Secrets featuring Chris Brogan and new Facebook insights. That's telling me everything I need to know and who it's from. Then the last one has international education, repeated happenings in June, not terribly exciting, etc. So which newsletters did I read? Those that were informative, interesting, and had enticing subject lines. All right, so style and tone. So just remember that your email newsletter is a friend. So you really want to think of how you actually speak to your friends or your colleagues, and you want to use the style and tone in your newsletter as well. So it's very similar to blog writing in that you're developing rapport with your customers, and you really want to sound like a person, not a robot. So number one, find your voice and be authentic. Write to your customers as if you're speaking to a friend because they are your friends. Be personable and have personality. Mari Smith, she's a social media speaker and author. She has a book called The New Relationship Marketing. And she talks here about getting out of that B2B or B2C mindset and really thinking of P2P, which she translates people to people, and how this will really help befriend your customers, build better relationships with your customers. Again, you want to be telling stories. You want to nurture and educate, and then you want to have a clear call to action. So in your newsletter, what do you want people to do? So provide them those actionable items. So read more, check it out, register now. You want to give them something that they should be doing so you can achieve that click. Hungry Girl. So this is an excellent example. So Lisa Lillian, aka Hungry Girl, there's actually a little cartoon figure of her up there you can see. She is the founder of hungrygirl.com, which is a free email that really entertains and informs people about food. And it's usually healthy food. And Hungry Girl started out as just an email newsletter. That was purely what she was doing in 2004, and she was just sending it to friends and family. But it kind of exploded into this huge nationwide thing. It's become this big phenomenon, and she has 1 million subscribers, and this is sent out daily. So she has 1 million subscribers, and she's now a New York Times bestseller. She has all these books. She has a Food Network TV show. She's on Rachel Ray, Good Morning America, etc. But I would highly recommend looking at her newsletters to really reach and see her personality, because it really shines through in her writing. She's really talking to you like you're a friend. If you found out about a really amazing froyo and it was low fat, you're going to go tell your friend about it. That's how her email newsletter is written, which is really fun. And that really shines through her writing. so it makes it really enticing. She kind of reminds me of a mix of Rachel Ray and that comic strip, or that comic Kathy. Remember that? That's who she reminds me of. But I can at least, combine two people and put them together and say that's who that newsletter is from, because there's definitely a personality in there, and it's a fun one. All right, so this I took from copy blogger Sean DeSouza. I hope I was pronouncing that correctly. He wrote a blog post called 5 Reasons Why No One is Reading Your Email Newsletter. So again, this is kind of just reiterating a lot of stuff that we've been talking about. 1, your newsletter isn't helpful. 2, your voice isn't very compelling. 3, you're not telling stories. And he says here, he goes, as human beings, we're entranced by stories at an early age. So he said, start stories about your clients, write about experiences in your industry or your thoughts about stuff that's going on in your industry. He said, when you're trying to elicit response, nothing gets your readers engaged like color and drama of a good story. So also, you have a half-hearted call to action. People don't know what you want them to do, and you don't have a specific frequency. All right, presentation and design. So this is really going over best practices, etc., specifically for newsletters. So on average, people spend 51 seconds reading an email newsletter. That's not a lot, but don't let that deter you. It's just important to note so that we make our content as scannable and informative as possible. So number 1, obviously we want to have the pre-header. That will always be at the very top aspect of your newsletter. Masthead and logo. You want to know, again, you want people to know who this newsletter is coming from. And this too, if a newsletter has a specific name, like the Insider or the Buzz, you can put that logo up there at the top. Again, with your company logo, because you want to reiterate so that people know, who is this newsletter even from. Then just always put the date in there so people are aware. A lot of times people don't even read newsletters or emails 2 or 3 days later, but they want to know, is that information timely? When did it come in? Table of contents. This you can include or you don't have to include. Really depends. You should test it too. But it is really helpful to have it at the very top of your newsletter so people can look at it immediately and see what's in the rest of the newsletter. If, say, there's something written at the bottom of table of contents and it's the very bottom of the newsletter, they know to go straight to the bottom and read that information because it's really fun to read. An intro, same thing. So this can be really helpful in building rapport, building that personality that you'd like with your newsletter. You can attach a photo. This can really help people get to understand who, if it's from one person, that's great. They can understand who this newsletter is from, who it's being written by, etc. But it's not always necessary. Then this next part is the most important part. So you want to have brief, scannable content blurbs, short paragraphs, and or summaries. Readers can quickly read and scan information in this blurb format. So that really includes a headline, few summary sentences, and then always a link to additional info. And then really just prioritize that information too within the newsletter, especially if you are not using a table of contents. The most enticing information you want to put at the top so people can see it immediately. And then you also don't want to start your newsletter right off with a huge image or a gigantic logo, because that's just going to push the content down even more. And then again, too, just breaking stuff up into stuff that's really easy by using bullet points or numbered lists, and then using concise headings and subheadings. This is actually what most people's eyes glance to, are those headings throughout your newsletter. So really make those enticing too. All right, I think I have another page. Yep. So continuing, call to action buttons. So when you want to link people to more information, always just put a button in there. Buttons tend to get more clicks. You can do a text link that says read more here, but the buttons are actually really visually appealing. People like to click on those. They like to go to town on buttons. So we try not to do something that says like click here. Give them more information, like read more, check it out, register now, so they know exactly what they're doing when they click on that button. And then throughout your blurbs, you want to include text links too, and always link your headings also, or your subheadings. People really like to click on that information as well. And then images. Think pinnable. So would this go onto Pinterest? Would someone see this on Pinterest? Would they want to pin it? People are pinning stuff all over the place now. So really think, are these compelling images? And then always make sure to link your images, because people like to click on everything. So they like to click on images too. Then social sites and social sharing buttons, these are two different things. So you want to include social media icons that link to your particular sites that you're on, but you also want to include those social sharing buttons so that people can share your entire newsletter on their Twitter or on their Facebook or on their LinkedIn. And then this one too is really important, mobile friendly. So is your newsletter mobile friendly? Does it render in an iPhone or an Android? Is it easy to click on the links or buttons with your finger? Are your images even rendering? I do this, I QA this on my own iPhone every single week. I open the VR Buzz, make sure that it's rendering properly, make sure that the images are correct. So really you want to use that too as part of your QA process to, or your editing process, look at it on your phone. Because there are 1.8 billion smartphones out there, and by 2014, internet usage on an iPhone is going to surpass that of a desktop. So that's really important. This is just one example that I have, Lonely Planet. You can see here they've broken up their content into 3 little blurbs with really compelling, nice images, talking about reader's choice, talking about New Zealand, etc. They have a table of contents on the right-hand side. It says in this issue, so I know immediately if I want to continue reading. And then at the very top, they have their social sharing buttons. So just a good example. So here at Vertical Response, we actually get a lot of feedback from our readers wanting similar templates to the VR Buzz. So we did create 4 similar templates to the Vertical Response, all including those top-notch aspects that a newsletter should have. So the broken down content blocks, images, you can see the headings, there are call to action buttons, etc. So you can find them in your Vertical Response account. They're on page 3 in the newsletter. It's called newsletter category on page 3. So they're all there, so I highly recommend using those.
Yeah, the one on the right should look really, really familiar if you get the VR Buzz.
Yep. Yep. All right, so these are, I put this in the other category, but they're uber important aspects. So frequency and consistency, this is really important when it comes to your email newsletter and building rapport, because people rely and depend and expect on your newsletter to be frequent and consistent. So if it's monthly or quarterly, state that and deliver monthly or quarterly. When you say it's weekly, make sure that it is actually weekly. Some people don't like surprises. It's kind of like having a flaky friend. You love them, but you no longer turn to them because they aren't very dependable. You don't want your customers to have that same reaction towards your newsletter. You want to be that trusty, dependable friend in their inbox. Whitelisting. So this is actually really easy to do. You want to provide information from your users. You can do this a lot. You'll see this on a lot of newsletters at the very top. They say, please add, and you include your newsletter email address that you're using to send out to your address book. This will help your newsletter get into their inbox without it being sent to spam. So that's something that you want to put at the very top, just simply asking people to add you to their address book. Reply email address. Sometimes you'll get an email from a company, and you'll look at the email, and it'll say, do not reply, et cetera, et cetera.
Do not reply at company.com.
Yeah, no one's reading this. This is not what you want to do. You actually want to have a reply email address and then actually check for replies and then reply in a timely manner. So people will actually know there is a person behind that email newsletter, and if they do have questions, they can reply to it and you will answer. Opt-in forms. Obviously, you need people to opt into your newsletter. So these are really important aspects, and I have a slide next that we'll look at. Same with archiving. You have all these really valuable, great newsletters. Archive them and make them public on your website so people can actually see them. And then a thank you email. Just sending an email to people who have subscribed saying thank you, and then give them more information about what they can find in your newsletter is super helpful. And then unsubscribe. So a person unsubscribing from your newsletter, it's just a fact of life. You don't want to take it personally. But I mean, I unsubscribed to stuff. I've actually unsubscribed to Hungry Girl and resubscribed several times because it's a daily newsletter. So sometimes it's too much, but sometimes I really want to know about it. People do that, and they can go back and forth. But that's something to note too. You want to make it actually really easy for people to unsubscribe, because if it's very hard for them to find your unsubscribe or whatever, they'll just hit that spam button, and your click-through rates, your open rates, everything will just drop, and you'll never have a chance to get back to them because you're just constantly going into their spam box. All right, so this is an example of our own opt-in form. So making your opt-in form easily accessible and found is really important. If no one can sign up, then they can't, get your newsletter. So you need to make it very easy on the opt-in form. And then on the opt-in form, let people know what the newsletter is about, so what they can expect and how often. Give them a snapshot of what the newsletter looks like, and provide archives of the past newsletters so they can kind of get a sense of what they're signing up for. The more information, the better. Also, readers are really concerned with the frequency of email. It's one of the top annoyances of most people. So if you deliver too frequently, they want to know. So state clearly how often, and if you can, when exactly that newsletter will arrive in their inbox. Because like I said, some people don't like surprises. So staying consistent will build that trust and rapport, and you really want to deliver what you promise. You can see here, we have a snapshot, we have a description of what's in the VR Buzz, and then we have up at the top a weekly email newsletter delivered once a week, so you know exactly when you're going to get it. Here too, I just wanted to give an example. So again, we have the vertical response opt-in form on top, and then below are all of our archives. So that's every single newsletter with a little description from the past. Hungry Girl, same thing. She has an opt-in form, and then all of her archives from the past, especially since she does a daily email. This, again, is from Lonely Planet. So they've provided a snapshot of what the newsletter looks like. They have a brief description. They've provided a link to the current newsletter. They have a very simple opt-out form. So that too, requiring minimal information. So only use the information that you're going to use, because if you make it really lengthy, that scares people off. And then they've actually provided privacy details and subscribe information. Again, view current issue, and they've even given you a 20% discount. That's nice.
Nice.
All right, reporting. So what's important? First and foremost, reporting should really be based on your own goals. You can Google industry standards, but you really shouldn't base your performance on other people or industries, etc. Really set goals for yourself and try to reach those. But obviously, you want to monitor your open rate and your click-through rate, because with a newsletter, again, the purpose of it is not to sell. It's really just to inform. So you want to make sure people are opening your newsletter, and you want to make sure that they're clicking through to either your blog or other information that you're sending. And then unsubscribe rate. If your unsubscribe rate is going through the roof, then there's something going wrong there. So you really want to monitor the unsubscribe rate. And then popular links. So this is my favorite aspect. It's really fun. It's like a kid in a candy store. I love to send the newsletter and then open up the reporting and see what people are clicking on the most. It's really fun. So really just monitoring, what are people clicking on? Did you have an article at the very bottom of the newsletter and that was the most popular link? Then maybe you should start including information, whatever content that was about. If it was an infographic and people went to town on it, then maybe include more infographics. So that actually gives you a lot of insight into your readers and what they like. All right, promotion and list building. And there are a million different ways that you can promote and build your list. This is just a handful. So obviously, homepage of your website. If you create a newsletter, let people know about it. Put it on, the top or the bottom to subscribe on your website. Also, if people are doing let's say a Google search and they they end up in the middle of your website, not the home page, make sure that if let's say you put it on a toolbar at the very top, make sure that that's actually going through every single page. So in case someone comes in through the middle of your site, they still see that consistent toolbar at the top, which has your newsletter subscription form or click. And then include a sign-up in every email. So even if you are sending a sales promotion specific email, say, hey, sign up for the whatever insider or the buzz. In every single email that you're sending, ask people to sign up for your newsletter. Obviously, you want to put it on any print collateral or postcards, social media sites. You can include your opt-in form directly onto your social media site, so definitely put it there. And then after you've actually created a newsletter and you've sent it out, make sure to tweet that newsletter, post it on your Facebook, and pin it. Because newsletters are actually really beautiful pieces of art. They are. They look very similar to infographics, and those are kind of exploding all over Pinterest. I did a Pinterest search the other day for newsletters. They're all over. So make sure to pin your own newsletter or even images from within your newsletter and have it click back to the hosted site. Forward to a friend, always include that in your newsletter. People like to forward to a friend. Sometimes even if people don't click on the forward to a friend button and they just push forward to their own email, still include it because people like to click on it. And then, go to a trade show or an event, have a fishbowl, ask people to sign up.
We also have a guide
Yes.
to help you grow your list.
50 ways to build your list.
Yeah, if you go to verticalresponse.com and click on resources, you'll see guides, and that one's in there.
Yes.
So if you need more list building, that'll help you.
All right, so testing. This is something you always want to be doing with your newsletter because, again, it's not based off of sales. It's based off of clicks, open rates, etc. So you really want to see what is the best format, etc. for your customer. So obviously you want to test your subject line and pre-header. This is going to determine whether or not your newsletter will get opened. So you can do A/B split testing on these. And you can do a variant too. You could feature just one aspect within your newsletter or list them all, list every single thing out. Make sure it's not too long, but really just play with your subject line pre-header, get creative with it. Buttons and imagery, you can see some of the buttons. These are from the VR Buzz here. So adding buttons or text links, changing the color or changing the size. Same with imagery. Content and placement, so this thing too. Prioritizing stuff at the top or putting stuff at the bottom, or where are you placing the content, or how much content are you including. Table of contents, including it or not including it doesn't make a difference. Audience, this is really, really important, and I highly recommend everyone to test this by segmenting your lists. So like I said before, I actually segment the VR Buzz into 9 different groups based off of what they do or who they are or what products they're using, etc. So I highly recommend testing this too, to just see how your different audiences are reacting to your newsletter. And then, of course, time of day or week. Tuesday could be better. 4 p.m. could be really great. Who knows? So just test that. Same thing with the intro, no intro. Do people really love the intro and they reply when you're talking to you all the time? Or does it really not make a difference and it's just pushing valuable information down? Test that out. Length. This is a big thing too. Is the information at the bottom of your newsletter getting clicked on? If not, you might want to rethink how long your newsletter is.